Earlier this month, China reportedly cancelled almost $78 million from Cameroon's debts, saying China is willing to cooperate with the Central African nation and reinforce economic ties. The move was seen as a major outcome of the meeting between Paul Biya, the Cameroonian president, and a special representative of China's President Xi Jinping, Yang Jiechi, during his visit to Cameroon from the 18th to 19th of January. However, the Chinese version of the Wall Street Journal, in an initial report published on the 22nd of January, told a different story, saying the Chinese government exempted Cameroon from debts of $5.4 billion instead of 78 million. The story was quoted by multiple Chinese language media and raised a lot of questions among Chinese netizens as to why such a big amount and how China handles its debt with African countries in general. Shortly before the show, we checked the Wall Street Journal Chinese website again and found the story has been quietly updated and the $5.2 billion number has been changed to 7.8 million. So what's the matter? Is China giving money to African countries for free like Santa Claus? Joining me for the discussion are Hannah Wenjie Ryder, China representative from the China-Africa Advisory, and Professor He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. So there you have the story. First of all, the Wall Street Journal report, two versions. We do not know. Obviously, the newer version seems to be the correct one. Let's first talk about this version. At this moment, Professor He, what do we know exactly? What is the number of the debt that has been cancelled? Has the Chinese government given any official numbers yet, or what we know basically come from the Cameroonian side?
Well, I double-checked those resources. I even published an article in CGTN website just today in the midday. So I checked Cameroon's newspaper, like Cameroon Tribunal, and also the sources from our website, Chinese Embassy in Cameroon. So it has been confirmed that debt has been cancelled is 78 million US dollar. So it's not that shocking number saying 5.2 billion. So 5.2 billion, that's the whole, those debts now Cameroon now owned to China. So even by those instinct, when I got this news also coming from like my friends now even teaching in Japan, he sent me this the immediate
screenshot.
And then I got lots of those resources saying, why such a big number? So, but even by instinct, I replied to my friends now, a professor teaching in Japan, I said it couldn't be that amount of number, because in the like FOCAC, China-Africa Cooperation Forum, established like in the year 2000, and then 2003, 2006, we have issued those debt write-off. So the whole of the amount, debt write-off, to all those African countries together is just 10 billion RMB. 10 billion RMB for all the countries. So how come
that would be about 13 billion US dollars?
Yeah, that's impossible story. And also we have heard like last year wrapped up this China-African summit in the September last year. If you look about all those 8 initiatives, hasn't mentioned anything now we need to, the debt write-off immediately to all those countries. So it's not the policy yet.
Okay, so it's clear that 5.2 billion US dollars is a wrong number. How come it was featured in the Wall Street Journal? And another peculiar thing is that this story only appeared in the Chinese version, not the international version, English version, not the French version, only the Chinese version of Wall Street Journal.
I think it's difficult for a lot of journalists to really understand the relationship between African countries and China, partly also because the data isn't released by the Chinese government on debt cancellation and debt restructuring. So what tends to happen is you have the African governments themselves, or even Asian governments, who will report themselves, Latin American governments who will report themselves about what has happened with the debt restructuring. So 78 million was reported by the Cameroonian government.
But nobody said 5.2 billion. I don't know where did that come from.
5.2 billion is the total amount of debt which is estimated for Cameroon. You can get that data from IMF debt sustainability analysis.
So definitely China did not write off all of Cameroon's debt to China. But yeah, I wonder, because it was very clear the original version was saying that according to a presidential statement by the Cameroon president, that China has cancelled 5.2 billion US dollars worth of debt to Cameroon. It was
well, it's not unusual for governments to cancel full amounts of debt to very poor, indebted countries. Remember back in 2005.
But the number, the problem is the number, and it's a very big difference.
It's
78 million versus 5.2 billion.
It's a big number for China, yes, but for other countries who have cancelled debt before, it isn't such a big number. Back in 2010,
well,
Cameroon's debt...
Hannah, I'm not talking about, whether this number is big as a debt. I'm talking about the accuracy of this report. Professor He, what is your possible understanding? And they gave out a tweet on Chinese social media, Weibo, which later on they deleted.
Yes, I think being any professional journalist, of course you need to verify those numbers, whether it's true or it's, because Cameroon is just Central Africa, those francs, the money, it's different with the dollar. So maybe they can say, oh, I changed the exchange rate, I did something wrong about counting, but totally I think this is unbelievable. This is a fake news, absolutely. So now there's a question. Yeah, you raised very well the question, why it just show up on those Chinese version, not in those English version and not the French version. I think it's very clear. Just by thinking it's simple, because to the Chinese version and then to the Chinese readers, those news readers, Chinese, because they read Chinese, those websites, so they feel very angry and not understandable at all, saying why our government cancelled in such an easy way, such a simple way, just to write off, this is a big money, because China is still developing country, we still have a lot of
Cameroon is in a terrible situation. The growth is under 3%, and it's recently had to cancel the African Cup of Nations that it was going to host in 2019. There were elections which went badly. There was an attempted coup. There was no reason. It wouldn't be an easy decision, but it would be it would be an important decision and a useful decision. Of course, 78 million is helpful. But that is the amount that Cameroon was meant to be paying in 2018 to the Chinese government, that amount. There's also still other debts that it's paying to other creditors, whether that's multilateral institutions,
but the thing is, the Chinese,
which are more significant.
The average Chinese readers, the average Chinese netizens do not have all of these backgrounds. They think that 78 million probably is too much already, let alone 5.2 billion. I think that is the scare, that is the damage that this misquoted figure is having on the Chinese.
Well, I think then it's also important for the Chinese public to understand the situation that the African countries are in when they are having to pay back debt, and also the amount, the scale of the amount of debt restructuring and so on, even over the last, it is actually not very unusual for the Chinese government to agree to write off amounts of debt. If you look back from reports since 2000, it's probably about 5 or so restructurings a year. There's around 85 instances of debt restructuring which are accounted, not just Africa, but across the world.
So already
the largest being Cuba.
Already in there are a lot of information to be explained, but still I want to find out a little bit more about such a story, because it's peculiar, such a difference of number, and they changed in the end without explaining what they changed, without saying what they did, what they wrote wrong, why they changed the updated on the 28th. Is this an individual story that we're talking about, a careless mistake of one journalist or one editor who probably didn't check facts, or are we seeing more or less a kind of a pattern? That's why a lot of Chinese commentators are quite angry with such reports. Professor He, your observation.
Sometimes we think there's an individual one, but too many individual ones. So if you put all those individual ones, you can see, put those pictures piece by piece, put it together. I see some kind of trend, coming from the Western media. Sometimes, they publish some story, targeting to some kind of group of reader, and to another group of reader, maybe talking about another kind of story. For example, like this debt issue, but to those English reader or French reader, they're talking about debt trap, saying Chinese government now has put a lot of debt on the African countries, so make them, fall in this trap.
So the story about China forgiving African debts doesn't make it to the international
readers.
Yes,
if this story saying China now is so generously cancelled all those debts, so there's no such kind of debt trap, because Chinese government is so generous. So this kind of story is so published in the Chinese version. So Chinese readers read this, they feel not understandable at all. Maybe they switch their anger to the
Chinese
for our own government.
Yeah. Hannah, what's your feeling hearing this? Do you have similar observation or not?
I am married to a journalist, a very great journalist, and I do know that mistakes can be made. I don't know whether this is one of them. I can't speculate on that. At least I'm glad that the Wall Street Journal have made the correction. That is good. And I think this is an opportunity to sensitize the Chinese public to the importance of managing debt and importance of debt restructuring where it's required in countries that really need it, as well as sensitizing the international community to understand that this is something that does happen, and
to the possible mistakes Western media can make.
There's only one way of making sure that this doesn't happen again, which is for the Chinese government to put the data out itself. That would make everything much easier, and people would be able to get the correct
answer. Actually, the Cameroon newspaper has made it very clear. I checked the newspaper. They're saying this is 78 million dollar. It's not like 5.2 billion dollars. So the information is there.
It was.
So I think now we are saying the Wall Street Journal has changed, updated the new one. So one thing they should make another thing, should make it clear why before that thing happened. So why now you change? At least if something wrong is okay, you make apologize, right?
Yeah, but the damage is already there because the story was republished, was quoted by many
people
others.
Already have this impression.
And many Chinese audience read the story already, and it's very difficult to explain after you have already published something. You know, it's. That's the kind of disadvantage the Chinese government is faced with. But you're right, they probably can do a better job by disclosing these numbers on themselves in the first place. All right, we're going to leave it there. I hope the discussion is helpful. Many thanks to Hannah Wenjie-Ryder, China representative from the China-Africa Advisory, and Professor He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy.